In a previous video, I expressed, shall we say, slight disappointment that a tin of Heinz Cheesy Beans were not beans in cheese sauce. So the obvious thing for me to do is make that for myself. So I'm going to make beans in a cheese sauce today, and it's not just going to be ordinary beans in cheese sauce. We're going to try and make it a little bit special. I've got some cannellini beans here that have been soaking overnight. So first thing to do is cook those. I think they'll probably take about 45 minutes on the stove. I could do it in the pressure cooker, but it's a very small amount of beans to bother putting the pressure cooker on for. So over here at the cooker, the beans are going to go in a big pan. I changed the water in those beans just in case something needed to soak out of them. And to assist these in cooking, I've got some bicarbonate of soda. I'm going to put about a teaspoonful of that in there. We'll bring those to a boil and then simmer until they're tender. While those beans are cooking, let's talk about cheese. I'm going to make a kind of 3 cheese sauce, or at least a 2 cheese sauce with another cheese for topping on here. So I've got 3 different cheeses. I've got some Grana Padano, which is a hard Italian cheese, quite tangy. I've got some mature cheddar from the Dorset open air dairy. In fact, why don't we have a little taste of that? To forgive this staining on my thumbnail, by the way, that's from picking tomatoes. In case you're wondering why I'm not making a tomato sauce for my beans, well, we've done that before. So if you're interested in seeing me make a homemade tomato sauce for my beans, have a look at this card or in the video description. There's a link to my golden beans. Anyway, this is a mature cheddar. We can tell it's mature from the fact that it has absolutely no flexibility. It's not bendy at all. Wow. Strangely, it tastes of... Now, it's from the open air dairy. It tastes of the outside. So, it's a lovely cheesy cheddar, but it's got a kind of fresh herbs and flowers kind of background note to it. Really interesting. I don't think I'm imagining that. It's got a slight floral note to it. Anyway, and this is another Dorset cheddar, a smoked one, smoked over oak. So let's have a little look at this one. I don't think this one's quite such a mature cheese, although it still has almost no bend to it. So this is smoked over oak wood. And just quite a mature cheese, because you can kind of perceive the little grains of I think it's calcium caseinate or something like that. It's whey granules in the cheese. I really like that. And the smoke flavour is really subtle, kind of warm fireside smoky flavour. Anyway, really nice cheeses. So these 2 are going to go in the sauce. This one's going to go on top, I think. My beans have now come to the boil and they're quite foamy. So I'm going to watch out for those boiling over. I've turned down the heat a little bit. I'll just keep an eye on that. I'll just probably put the lid on like that, as it's less likely to boil over. But we'll keep an eye on those, test them every now and again for softness. The bicarbonate of soda should hopefully speed up the cooking a little bit. Just as a kind of semi-afterthought, I've got some garlic granules here. I'm going to put about 1/4 teaspoonful, maybe a little bit more, maybe a 1/2 teaspoonful of garlic granules in with the beans. I was going to put that garlic powder in the sauce, but I think actually I want it to cook into the beans. I think we'll also have a couple of little sprigs of savoury from the herb garden. Savoury is sometimes known as bean herb and supposedly helps the digestibility of beans for people that experience problems with that. I don't know if that's true, but that's what people say. While those beans are cooking, we're going to make the cheese sauce. I'm being a little bit premature here, but the cheese sauce will stand. We can warm it back up. So I've got about 30 grams of butter. I'm just going to melt that. I'm making a cheese sauce that is kind of like a Mornay sauce. It's got about 25 grams of flour now. It's going to go in there. And this should come together to form a kind of thick paste, if we've got the amounts right. If it's too runny, add a bit more flour. If it's kind of chunky and turns into crumbs, add a bit more butter. We're just going to gently fry that now to cook off the flour. Let it sizzle like that for a few minutes. Some people judge that by smell and say it smells like hazelnuts when it's done. I tend to just do it by time. The more you fry this flour, the more flavour it will have, but the less capacity to thicken it will have. That's enough. And now I'm going to have some milk. I don't know how much milk at the moment, so I will measure. I've weighed my milk bottle. I'll weigh it again at the end, and I'll be able to tell you how much milk I've used. I do get quite a lot of people suggesting that I use a citrate-based cheese sauce because it's silky. I prefer a roux-based, like a Mornay sauce, because it's not silky. That silkiness of sauce, to me, I perceive that as slimy. And so I tend to prefer the ever so slightly sort of grainy texture that you get with a Mornay sauce that's got mature cheese in it. And I think that might come back to the fact that my preference for cheese is if it's crumbly. A really good mature cheddar has, in my opinion, got texture. Right, while I've been wittering, that sauce has thickened up a little bit. See that? I'm going to add a bit more milk. Kind of doing this a little bit by instinct, but as I say, I will put the amounts of the ingredients on the screen once I've determined what they are. I tend to do this by feel. Yeah, that's going to be enough. We just need that to thicken a little bit more. As the flour cooks, the starch granules explode and thicken the sauce. So we just need to make sure that we've not added too much milk, or else we'll end up with a thin sauce. But also that we've added enough milk that the sauce isn't going to seize and become a dough. So that sauce has now thickened nicely, and I can tell, as I say, from experience of making these kind of sauces, that is enough milk. I don't need to thin that any further with any more milk. So I weighed my milk bottle before and after, and that was 303 grams of milk. So we can say 300 ml of milk. And in with my cheese. So I got 50 grams of the Dorset open air dairy cheddar. I haven't grated this. If you grate the cheese, it will go into the sauce quicker, but you don't need to. Cutting it into small cubes is enough. It will just melt into the sauce if we keep on whisking. I got 25 grams of the Grana Padano. Now I have grated this one because it's such a hard cheese. So we'll add that. I was going to say a bit at a time, but it was all kind of tangled up together. We'll just work with it. So that goes in. That will melt in quite quickly because it was grated. If you want to go to the trouble of grating all of the cheese, as I say, it will combine with the sauce a lot quicker. But cutting it into small cubes is the kind of lazy option. I'm not sure it is that lazy actually, because you end up whisking it more. That cheese has provided some additional thickness to this sauce, but that's good because we do want it to coat the beans. Which reminds me, I must check on the beans. Just whisk one out. Not quite, but they are getting close. I reckon maybe another 10 minutes for those beans. Okay, so that's my sauce. That heat can go off now. It would be remiss of me not to taste this cheese sauce. That is a really nice cheesy cheese sauce. You can add a little bit of mustard to a cheese sauce and it will enhance the cheese. It doesn't actually taste of mustard, it just makes the cheese taste more cheesy, but I want to go for the purity of the cheese flavour in this particular case. Alright, these beans are done. So that's only taken about half an hour, which I think the bicarbonate of soda has hastened the cooking. It's also made the skins a lot more tender on the beans. But yeah, these are done now, so you can see I can quite easily crush that with my finger. So I'm going to drain these now, stop them cooking. There is one more thing to go with my beans, which is I'm going to make some aioli. This was a suggestion from somebody on Discord actually, and it sounds a very fine suggestion. I haven't had this. Well, I haven't ever made cheesy beans before actually, but This sounds like a very fine suggestion. So the idea is we're going to make some fresh aioli and we're going to stir that in, or maybe just press it on top of the cheesy beans right at the end. So it's going to be like a little bright note on top of the luscious sort of mellow notes of the cheesy beans. So we're going to start with some crushed garlic. About 3 cloves of crushed garlic. Probably more than I need for this dish, but you've got to make a certain amount of this to be able to mix it properly. All right, so we've got the crushed garlic. I'll have a little pinch of salt. And then a bit of olive oil. And lemon juice would be more normal, but limes are what I got, so. And then just a bit more oil. We're getting close now to serving up. I'm just going to make a portion of these beans. So some of my cooked beans in the pan there, and some of the cheese sauce. A generous amount of cheese sauce, I think. It looks about right. Now I'm just going to warm that up very gently. But before I do, there are 2 other things. One is that you've probably noticed this little jar of hot chilies at the back here, the hot pickled chilies. I'm going to slice up a few of these as a garnish. And then, I can't just eat beans with cheese sauce. It's got to be beans on toast. So a couple of slices, I think, of my dark rye bread that I made. So this is from my bread sheet, which may not be published yet, that video. But anyway, this is, a dark rye bread. So I'm just going to stick that in the toaster and get that a little bit crispy. We're getting close now to the culmination of this grand experiment. So my toast, which has been allowed to cool a little bit, just give it a little smear of butter. Okay, now how are we going to cut our toast today? Well, I think we'll go on the diagonal today because that means we can arrange it on the plate thusly. The beans, which have been very gently warmed through and are just steaming hot now, so this kind of beans in a creamy cheese sauce. Let's see if I can just adjust the, yeah, that's better. This was somewhat close to my expectation for what we were going to get from the Heinz can, was some sort of creamy cheese sauce. Anyway, we need more cheese. The oak wood smoked. I'll have a little bit of that over the top. The aioli, which I think is split a little bit, but I don't care. I think we just kind of drizzle a little bit of that on like that. Pickled hot chilies. And maybe a little bit more of the oak wood smoked cheese. And then finally some chives from the garden, which I'll just snip over with scissors into tiny little pieces. Good. Okay. So there we go. That is my interpretation of cheesy beans. Okay, thumbnails are done. Well, let's just taste the beans and the cheese and the garlic first before we try it with a bit of toast. So, cheesy beans. Oh, that works. That definitely works. And the smoky cheese is very, very welcome in there. Okay, now a little bit of everything on toast. Oh, wow. The combination with this dark rye bread. That is so nice. The aioli is really good too. We need a bit more of that. Wow. Okay, I'll tell you why this is good. So, the beans in the cheese sauce, just lovely and comforting and mellow. And then the bright notes from the pickled chilies and the aioli, just fantastic highlights. That smokiness from the smoked cheddar that comes through sort of halfway through the taste experience just gives it another dimension. And I do think that putting this on dark rye toast was the right choice, because that robust, nutty, grainy flavour from the dark rye really stands up well against all these other things. So you're actually watching the prototype recipe being created here, or rather consumed, and I'm very happy with how that went. In case you may be wondering why the Brits are so fond of beans on toast. My advice would be stop wondering and try it. And what's nice about this is it is beans on toast, but it is a completely different animal to your regular beans in tomato sauce on toast, which is also lovely, but this is lovely for a whole range of different reasons. So there we go, cheesy beans on toast. If anyone from Heinz is watching, you're welcome. So that was my interpretation of cheesy beans. Recipe notes are in the video description. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.